Hi, everybody. My name is Kay, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. I'm very honored. Wow, I'm honored to be here. Big time, I'm honored to be here. I don't know what it is about people in Arkansas, but you give the best welcome basket in the world. And I don't know who made those homemade cookies, but just so you know, I've already eaten half of them. They're wonderful. I'm really very happy to be here. And like I said, just honored to be a part of your 69th anniversary convention. Wow, that's amazing. My sobriety date is August the 3rd, so I have a little birthday coming up, 1975. I'd like to tell you I got sober when I was about 6 years old, but that would be a lie. Anyway, my day started with AA. At the airport, I had gone through great lengths to get the perfect aisle exit row seat on my flight, LA-Dallas. And I got on the flight, and sure enough, everything I maneuvered worked out perfectly. I got 18D right on the aisle exit row. It was great. And then just then this woman came on board, and she said, "Oh, would you mind moving so I can sit next to my husband?" And I said, "Where's your seat?" And she goes, "It's that middle one back over there." And I looked, and this is what AA does for me constantly, is in my mind I'm thinking, well, I don't want to sit in your lousy middle seat. I've got this great 18D aisle right by the exit. But AA has always taught me to act better than I feel, so I said, sure, no problem. And so her husband, they moved, and so the guy that I was now going to be sitting next to, he said, what a nice thing to do. And I thought, it's not me. It's not me. It's Alcoholics Anonymous that over these 33 years has told me this is what you do, and if you do it this way, things are going to be a whole lot better. And what ended up happening is I had one of the nicest flights I've had in ages. I was with this young woman who was pregnant on this side of me. I was in the center, as I mentioned. And the guy next to me was some businessman from Dallas, and we just bonded, and it was about a 3-hour flight or a little less than that, all the way from LA. And we were just bonding, and the interesting thing is he and I got into politics, never a good thing to do. But the truth is he knew and I knew that he and I were both from very different ends of the spectrum, but it didn't matter. You know, we found this middle ground, and we just had a love fest all the way to Dallas. But again, that's Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's those little miracles that happen in my life every day, because you guys have taught me you act different than you feel. And I don't know about you, but I have not somehow crossed the invisible line into normalcy. No matter how old I get or how long sober I am, I bring myself to the party, and not long ago there was we went to this meeting in West Covina. Oh, and thank you, Lisa and David, for picking me up. We did have a fun drive on the way from, this is beautiful here. Talk about contempt prior to investigation. But let me that sounds much worse than it is, trust me. People from Los Angeles, La La Land, as some might say, we think there's only two states. There's California and there's New York. And it's so incorrect. And seeing these other places, I was just flying over it, it's like it's so green. It's so green and lush here. It's beautiful here. This hotel is beautiful. This is a great place. You guys are fortunate. Anyway, what I was saying is not too long ago, I was at this meeting in West Covina, and there was a very elderly gentleman there. I mean, he was pushing 100, this guy. Anyway, we knew he was taking a cake. So naturally, we assumed that he was going to be taking a cake for, 69 years or whatever of sobriety. And he wasn't. He was there to take a cake for 1 year. I know. And I remember thinking, if I could have made it that long, I think I would have just kept it up. Taken my chances. But I have to tell you, we asked him, as politely as we could, we asked him, what made you get sober, at this age? Truly, what made you get sober? He said, you know what, honey, I'll tell you what made me get sober. He said, before I leave here, I want to know just once what it's like to be present in my own life. And I thought I identify with that because I was never present in my own life before I met you guys. And I always want to apologize whenever I speak because I don't know about you, but I always want to hear stories. Now, mind you, I don't want to have lived them, but I like to hear them. Stories about the woman who, was a crack whore from Philadelphia, sold her 2 kids for one more fix, and joined AA and is now an attorney, or better yet, she's a judge. And you know what? As you know, there's a lot of those stories in AA. One of my best friends, that is her story. Like I said, I love hearing those kinds of stories. I apologize, I don't have that kind of a story. I wish I did. Again, wouldn't have wanted to live it, but I would have loved to have been able to talk about it. But that's not my story. My alcoholism was that I lived a quiet life of desperation. And I was born and raised in a little sleepy community by LAX airport called Westchester, into a family with 3 brothers, a mother and a dad. And I adored my father very much. We were a very waspy group, and I, for some reason, thought we should be ethnic and wanted either a Jewish mother or an Italian mother because I wanted that demonstrative kind of thing. And my mother was very German and very cold and whatever. But anyway, sweet though she was, we were not the warmest bunch. But my dad was. But he was the alcoholic. And my dad was fun. I loved my father. But my mother didn't. And she divorced him when I was about 4 because she said he was an alcoholic. And he probably was. I don't know. But what I do know about him is he was a whole lot of fun. And the other thing about my dad is that I knew he loved me. I was always very basic. If you liked me, I just liked you right back. It really didn't get much more complicated than that. And I knew he did. And after the divorce, Monday night was visitation night, and my dad would pick me up. And he used to have a 1952 Chevrolet convertible. And this was obviously, it was in the 50s, and this was obviously before they had seatbelt laws and drinking and car laws too, because I would stand next to him, I was 5, 6 years old, in the passenger seat, and he would have the top down and he'd have a cigarette in one hand and a bourbon in the other. And I'd have my arm around his neck and we'd go cruising down Manchester Boulevard to the Thunderbird Hotel where he would be dating usually the big busted manicurist of the day. And then before he'd take me home, he'd say, "Now, honey, we're going to make a little pit stop at the Melody Room Bar." And we would go into this seedy bar, and you know the kind of bar I'm talking about. It's dark. It's nice, that wonderful, nice lighting. It's dark and red leather, and there's not a social drinker in the place, But my dad was very popular. Everybody knew Chet. There's Chet. And we'd come in, and I just thought, this is really fun, and this is a good thing. And I loved being with him. But again, it was just as basic as I knew he liked me. And then he'd drop me back off at home, and that wasn't so fun. And again, perception. We learn here that we have skewed, to say the least, perception, and I know I did. And I was the only girl with 3 brothers. I could have played that role up really well and had a good time, but I didn't. For some reason, I got here into the world just scared as can be. I was very phobic, just afraid of everything. And so how I would cover it up is I became contrary, and I became hostile, and I became moody, but I was just scared of everything. So because of that, I became the black sheep of the family. And I was always in trouble. My mother remarried, and she remarried this guy who was very, very strict and believed that you should follow the rules and regulations, and I didn't. And so they just thought, well, what are we going to do with her? So they devised this punishment when I was little to get me, I'm sure, to change my attitude. And the punishment was this white chair in the corner of my room where they would send me for days, for hours that turned into days, to sit on the white chair and think about how I was going to change my attitude. And what I learned on the white white chair really became my first drug of choice, and that is the world of fantasizing. I fantasized my family away, and I created a whole new family that I called the Howards. And I moved in with the Howard family, and I was every member of that family. And when I tell you that I lived in that world, only other alcoholics would believe this, really. From the ages of about 6 until 16, I just never left. I mean, in fact, I didn't have to be sent to the white chair. My stepfather would say, "Where's Kay?" "Oh, she's on the white chair." "Did you send her?" "No, she goes there for fun now. She just goes there for fun." And so again, that was my, pardon me, first drug of choice. I was so into the Howard family that later on when I got sober, I remembered them off in the distance, and I had to sort of finish them. I had to sort of send them to college, give them careers, marry them off. I just couldn't leave them out there in fantasy land all by themselves because they were too much a part of my life, you know. And I think like some of us, or most of us, I was a good kid, really. I was a Girl Scout. I loved being a Girl Scout. I was a little tomboy. I was athletic, but I was frightened, and I was just so scared. And so, talk about contempt prior to investigation. If I hadn't done it yet, it wasn't going to be a good idea. You know, it just wasn't going to be a good idea. And it was terrible. And anyway, when I was about 13, my parents, I did something one summer, and they put me on this restriction that lasted 3 months. And during this time, I was sent to my room for 3 months. And during that time, I kind of went crazy. And when I got out, when it was time to go back to school, I just had this weird attitude, and I quit the I got kicked out of the Girl Scouts. And then I used to have this little ponytail, and I cut it off, and I changed my appearance. I started ratting my hair up really high and wearing a ton of makeup, and I went from, when kids stopped seeing me in school, I went from this little Girl Scout with a ponytail. 3 months later, I looked like a slut from Torrance, you know. I just changed my appearance, and I don't know why, but I just did, and went back to school, and because I looked different, I attracted an entire new group of friends, and they were the drug addicts of Westchester. And in particular was my boyfriend, who was the biggest drug addict in Westchester. And, you know, things weren't good at home. My mother and I never got along, and my stepfather. So I found a new group, and they were the people that did drugs. And I look back now, and I think they're sort of innocent drugs, you know. I mean, I compared to today, I don't know. I mean, we just did a little hashish, downers, mini whites, a little bit of LSD, the innocent drugs. The harmless drugs of the late 60s, you know. And that's what we did. But I didn't drink. And I didn't drink because I had a lot of aunts and uncles that were alcoholics, and I knew that my dad was an alcoholic. Plus, I didn't like it. That's really why I didn't drink. I just didn't like it. So I just did drugs for a while. But I was a very, the kind of girl that your parents would have said if you were friends, don't hang out with her. Because I really looked rough, really bad. We called them low riders. I was a low rider. And my boyfriend used to have this 1949 Oldsmobile with a gold metal flake top and hydraulic lifts, and I'd kind of push my hair down and get inside the car, and we would do what my dad and I used to do, just go cruising down the boulevard and smoke dope and steal hubcaps and analyze album covers for months on end. But again, I fit in with this group, and I felt happy and I felt content. But I was very, very out of touch with my surroundings. You can't live like that and not be out of touch. And you know, when you rat your hair like that, it really is helpful that you brush the back of your hair at some point. And I never did. Because I had this philosophy that walking towards you was all that mattered. So anything that was askew, went to the back, didn't exist. If I had a run in my stocking, I would turn it around to the back, and didn't count. And I never brushed the back of my hair. So what happened is I developed this knot in the back that got rather large, like this. It was huge. But again, I don't see it. It's not real. But I remember sitting in high school assemblies, and you know, when you're a teenager, what do you care about? You know, as far as I remember the only thing I ever cared about was being accepted and fitting in. That's it. It didn't get more sophisticated. And I remember hearing people sitting behind me in high school assemblies and saying, what is that on the back of her head? And I was mortified. I felt horrible about it, but it never crossed my mind that this tragedy could end if I just went to my local hairdresser, spent $5, 2 minutes of labor, it could be cut out and the tragedy would be behind me. No one ever brought it up. It never crossed. I kept that thing for 2 years on the back of my head until it finally grew out, and then it probably fell off by itself. I don't know. But I bring that story up for one reason and one reason only. That's how out of touch I was with my surroundings. I just didn't know about life at all. When I was 18, I took my first drink. And I was at a party, and this guy that I liked asked me, he said, look, it would mean a lot to me tonight if you would impress my friends and be sort of the life of the party. And I said, oh, I can't do that. That's not something I do. And he said, I know. He said, you take a lot of speed, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, you really need to loosen up. He said, get drunk. Just get drunk. And I said, I hate it. I don't like it. And he yelled out to one of his friends across the party, his friend Dave, and he said, Dave, get her something that she'll like. And Dave ran over very excited, and he brought this carbonated malt liquor wine, and it was this beverage called Right Time. I don't know if anybody remembers Right Time. It was only on the market for maybe 2 years. It was kind of like Cold Duck. It was good. It was a carbonated malt liquor wine. The ad line was, it's always the right time for right time, right? And I remember that I took off the bottle cap and I held my nose and I drank down the first bottle, the second, the third, and the fourth. And we're all a little different here. Some people will drink for years and then they cross the invisible line. I mean, we're all a little bit different. When I was new, they said, don't listen for the differences, listen for the similarities or the feelings. And I can tell you that for me, just for me, that's when I crossed the invisible line. It was that first night and those first 4 bottles of Right Time. And I started drinking that stuff, and I never drew a sober breath until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because why would you? I was uncomfortable. I was tense, I was frightened, I didn't feel good in my own skin, and this stuff was brilliant. It was cheap, it was legal, and you could go to your local drugstore and pick it up for $1.98. Why do drugs? This was the answer. It was liquid oxygen, and I fell in love with it. And I started drinking, and that night I went home and said to my roommates, guess what, I drink now? Which they wondered why I was making this proclamation, but it didn't take them long. Because within 2 months they asked me to move out because I drank morning, noon, and night. Now, as I told you, I would love to give you this, edge of your seat, oh my God, she did what, kind of drunkalogue, but that's not how I lived. But I drank morning, noon, and night, and I discovered I went from Right Time into Gallo Rheingarten, a couple of gallons of that a day. And I started, like I said, in the morning, I just drank and drank and drank and did my little thing. And my life got really small, really fast. About 4 years into my drinking, I was about 22. I'll tell you what a typical day was for me, and that really kind of covers the whole time because it never changed. Typical day, well, towards the end, I had met this one person who let me, for $75, sleep on her couch. And she had a little boy, little 3-year-old son, who intimidated me, a live-in housekeeper, and then there was Margaret, and then I lived on the couch. And Margaret was a nurse, and every morning I had this routine that never, ever changed. At about 8:05, Margaret would take the 3-year-old to preschool, which gave me just enough time to run into the kitchen, open up the refrigerator, take a knife and scrape the frost off the freezer so I could get a little bit of it into my Rheingarten jug just to take the room temperature off, to get down my morning few belts. And then she'd come home, now I'm going to go to work. About 10 o'clock, I would ask everybody in my office, what do you need? I'm going to do a run. And they would order donuts or whatever it is that they ordered. And I would go to Danny's Liquor and I would get my morning bottle of Gallo, drink that, come back. Now it's lunchtime. Now Danny is beginning to think that I drink a lot because I've been doing this now for 4 years. So Danny one day nudges his colleague behind the counter and he goes, "What are you going to do, Kate? Take it and go under the Venice Pier?" And they got this big laugh. They just said, "Oh, that was so funny," you know? And I was so hurt and offended. I thought, oh, if they're not careful, they're going to lose my business, number one. But I just was so hurt that they would imply that I'm going to go under the Venice Pier and drink my bottle, because I never went under the Venice Pier. I found this really wonderful vacant parking lot in a little city called Palms, and I could go there on my lunch hour and drive in figure eights where no one would see me until I finished my lunchtime bottle and go back to work. And then at nighttime, my routine was, again, it was just day in and day out. It never changed. At night, I would get all dressed up to go out to dinner by myself, which I went every night by myself. I would go to the Manchester's Jack in the Box. And I had one of those 70s cars, you know, that we had in the 70s. It was a Dodge Challenger. I don't know if anybody remembers those. It had a 440 Magnum engine, and it idled at 65 miles an hour. And I'm driving this thing as drunk can be. God, I mean, I don't know. God help anybody in my way. And just a miracle that I didn't kill anyone. But it would take every bit of courage that I could muster as a 22-year-old woman to get to that Jack head and look into that plastic face and order what I ordered every night for dinner, which was a breakfast Jack and a cup of black coffee. And if I could do that, I could go get my nighttime bottle, pack of cigarettes, got my breakfast Jack, got my coffee. I've got my supplies. I'm going back to the fort. And I would drink, and I'd put on this Joni Mitchell record, which I listened to day in and day out. I'm sure she wrote it for alcoholics. It was called Court and Spark. And I would listen to that album, and I'd just drink and smoke until I passed out. Next morning rolls around, 8:05, Margaret's taking the kid to preschool. Scrape the frost off the freezer, take the room temperature off the gallo, drink it down, figure eights at lunch, nighttime, Jack in the Box. This went on day in and day out for years. And it never crossed my mind that there was anything wrong with that, because what happens to us, at least for me, is my life got so teeny and tiny, it was just fine. I didn't want anything bigger than that because I couldn't handle anything bigger than that. I didn't know anything about living life. I just knew get yourself there and get yourself back. And I had developed such a state of anxiety that I could no longer be with people. I certainly couldn't be in rooms like this with the lights up. No way. And I was in pretty bad shape. But it never crossed my mind that I should stop drinking. One night, I had done the Jack in the Box run, no different from any other night. Got my wine, I'm sitting on the bed, listening to Joni Mitchell, getting drunker and drunker, smoking the cigarettes. Looked in the mirror, and for a split second, caught a glimpse of myself, and I just uttered the words, "God help me." But I wasn't in prayer. I was really just exhaling off of a cigarette. But I said, "God help me." I put the cigarette out and passed out a few moments later, and that's all I remember. But as you know, if you've been around here at all, how many times have you heard someone say, "God help me," and their life completely turns around? And that's what happened to me. The very next day, I was starting junior college, which I did a lot. I was pretty good with night number 1, but don't ask me to do night number 2. But night number 1, I was okay. So I showed up, and it was a hot October in 1974, actually. And we were having a heat wave in Los Angeles, and I was wearing a wool jacket and a turtleneck sweater and a scarf around my neck. It never gets that cold in Los Angeles, certainly not in October. But that's how I was dressed, and I was getting out of my car. And at the same time I'm getting out of my car, this girl pulls up next to me, and we're both getting out of our cars at the same time, and we're walking through the campus, and she looks at me, and I looked at her. And as I remember the story, I remember the story that she came up to me. She said, no, you ran up to me, and you said, "I am lost. Can you help me find my class?" And she said, "Sure." She said, "Well, what class are you taking?" And I said, "Business, management, whatever it was." I said, "What class are you taking?" Now, the truth is I didn't care, but I had seen other people ask that question before. So I asked her, I said, what class are you taking? She said, oh, I'm not taking a class. She said, I'm here tonight to give a lecture on alcoholism and drug abuse. I said, wow, that's interesting. I said, are you going to talk for it or against it? She said, well, I guess a little of both, come to think of it. So she goes, look, I got to go and you've got to go. Give me your phone number. And I thought that was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. But I said, okay. And already God was doing something for me that I wouldn't do because I'm a no girl. I'm no to the bottom of I'm no. But out of nowhere, I said, okay, and I gave her my phone number. The next morning, I'm sitting on the front lawn drunk with my gallo, and I'm sitting there with the 3-year-old kid in heavy debate over something. And the phone rings, and it's this girl. And she said, do you remember meeting me last night at Santa Monica College? And I said, yeah. She said, are you sober right now? I said, no. She said, well, are you sober enough to get in your car and drive to the Marriott Hotel at LAX and meet me? If anyone doubts that a power greater than ourselves is involved, my mother used to say when I had about 10 or 15 years of sobriety, she would say, I think it's so great that you AAs pull yourselves up from your bootstraps. I said, not so much. I said, if we had them, we wouldn't even been able to see them. I said, no. Because what happened for me is out of nowhere, again, a power greater than myself said, say yes, get in your car and go. And I got in my car and I met her at the Marriott Hotel at LAX. And we sat there in the cocktail lounge for hours, drinking 7-Ups and Diet Cokes and talking about this organization that she belonged to called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew I had a way out because I said, well, I identify with everything you're saying. It's so weird. I can't believe that you're saying what you're saying. That's my life. But I said, I can't really join because I'm too young. I'm sorry, just too young. And she says, well, how old are you? And I said, 22. And she said, well, I don't know how to break this to you. She says, but I'm 15 years old, and I've got 2 years clean and sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard her or know her. Her name is June G. And she's one of my dearest, she's my sponsor today. She's one of my best friends and my sponsor today. But anyway, this 15-year-old kid is 12-stepping me at that time. And I said, well, now what do we have to do? And she said, well, we're going to go to meetings. And I said, oh, can I stop you there? I said, I don't do rooms that are lit, and I don't do groups. And she goes, how long has it been? I said, oh, a long time. I can't. I have anxiety attacks. I'm plagued with them. I can't do it. You don't understand. And she said, don't you worry, honey. We're going to go to a meeting tonight, and we're going to help you. So I thought, oh, okay. I thought, well, I guess they'll give me a couple of Valiums on the way in, or in the parking lot, just to take the edge off. And we went to this meeting. It was about this size, and it was this bright. And we were in the back of the room, and I thought, where's the sedative? It wasn't coming. I didn't see it. And their idea of helping was that she would hold on to one of my wrists, and her friend Bob would hold on to the other. And that was their idea of helping. But you know what? I got through it, and as what always happens in AA, the woman who spoke that night, coincidentally, just happened, she was from Texas, actually, and she used to have anxiety attacks. She used to have anxiety attacks, and now she didn't, and that's what I heard. And that was my hook. And this June, but anyway, when the meeting was over, I thought, gee, it's great, and I was very attracted to AA, but I thought, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And she said, no, honey, now we're going to go to a midnight meeting. And I was attracted. Now, June, everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous in Los Angeles knew June because there weren't a lot of 15-year-olds with 2 years. So she was AA celeb. And she was on a first-name basis with Chuck C. and Alabama, you name it. They all knew her. So I was pretty attracted to Alcoholics Anonymous. However, the 12 steps looked like homework and labor to me. And I didn't want to do those. I thought, I'll do everything but that. I thought, my bright idea was I will get a Easy Does It bumper sticker, put that on the back of my car, a really nice Serenity Prayer necklace, but I'm not doing those steps. That's work. Anyway, that doesn't work. But I remember when I had about 2 weeks, we went to this convention in San Diego. Must have been about 30,000 alcoholics there. I'm not exaggerating, really. And Chuck C. was the speaker. Now, Chuck C., who a lot of you might know, and he wrote A New Pair of Glasses, and he was very much known in AA lore as the most spiritual man in AA. And he truly was certainly one of them, but he was known for that, and that was sort of the ad line about Chuck C. He is spiritual. And June goes, I want you to come tonight and hear him speak. And when he spoke, he had this beautiful head of white hair. So when the light shone on his head, he looked like a Catholic saint from the podium. But when the meeting was over, I did not know that June had said to him, go say hi to my sick little newcomer. I didn't know that she had said that. So when the meeting was over, he walked right up to me through 30,000 alcoholics, and he went to me and he goes, you're K and you're new. I thought, oh my God, he is spiritual. I couldn't believe it. But again, I was attracted to AA, but I didn't want to do the work. So what would happen is I'd put about 3 months in, be with someone who drank. I remember I went out with this one guy. I'd never had a margarita. I was young. He ordered a margarita. He said, you want one? I said, no. His came. I reached across the table and I took his margarita. But as I was doing that, I had a memory, kind of an out-of-body experience, that the night before, when I was having one of my regular nightly flip-outs, June was reading me the big book by candlelight and feeding me tea with honey and Snickers bars to calm me down. And I thought, don't think about that right now. And I took the drink. Put in another 3 months, did it again, put in another 3 months. I just wasn't getting sober. So about a year passed. And finally, June doesn't know what to do with me. And so there was another thing going on with me at the time. And I don't want to offend anyone in this room. I really don't. I don't want to separate myself from you guys because you're my people. We're each other's people. But there was something else going on with me at that time. And what it was is I had a secret, and I didn't think I could be this and also be sober. And that is that I knew that I was gay. And I thought, you can't be sober and gay. That's not going to work. And I just thought, well, I'll just keep that a secret till I die, So I would date these poor guys, and then I would, lie to them, and it wasn't good. And finally, I went out with this one guy, and he said, Kay, you've got to be honest. He said, whatever you are, what we learn in Alcoholics Anonymous is rigorous honesty. And I could be telling you that I was a teamster. Again, I don't mean to separate it. It's just my story. But for me, I had to be honest. And I just didn't know I could be. And it was because of Alcoholics Anonymous that I knew that I could. So I was obsessed for a while there. And June's taken me all over LA. I had this dialogue. I would say, hi, because I kept slipping. Hi, I'm Kay, I'm new, and I think I might be gay. Now, June did not appreciate this because she's looking for a husband. And anyway, so she went to Chuck, and she said, Chuck, what do I do with this newcomer? She's going to ruin my reputation. And he said, you know what, June? Send her to her own people. And she did. She loaded me up in her Volkswagen, and she dropped me off at this gay women's garage sale in the San Fernando Valley. And she screeched a wheelie and took off. And there's an old saying around here, I don't think it had much to do that I was with my people. I think it had to do that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. And that's really what happened. It had nothing to do with gay, straight, or anything else, other than I had to be honest. But I met this woman who on sight I could not stand. And on sight, she couldn't stand me back. Now, who would have guessed that that would be exactly what God wanted. She became my sponsor. And I had always thought, because I didn't have the sort of ethnic demonstrative mother, that I would have that kind of a sponsor, you know, the kind of little gray-haired old woman that would say, "Hi, honey, I saved a seat for you up front. Come on up." No, I had the meanest junkie heroine. She was the meanest woman I'd ever met in my life, and she could not stand me, and it was perfect. Because when she spoke, I listened, and I did not think anything was up for discussion. And she said, "Aren't you the one that has that boring little story with the figure eights in the parking lot and the Jack in the Box and the Gallo?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "And aren't you the one that like every 3 months decides that you can have a drink?" And I said, "Yes." And I kind of smirked. And she said, "Let me ask you something, Kay. When you were on the little white chair, or you were doing the figure eights in the parking lot, or you were ordering your breakfast jack for the 700th time, let me ask you something. How did you feel?" And I didn't know how I felt about anything. So I thought, uh-oh, what does she want me to say? So I had been around long enough to learn the one-liners, you know. So I said, well, I didn't feel a part of. I certainly felt less than. And I just threw a bunch of dialogue at her just so she would leave me alone. And she said, "Let me ask you something. Maybe one of those times when you were doing the figure eights and you were drunk and throwing out the door of your Dodge Challenger, did you feel lonely by any chance?" And she got me. Because if I had felt anything, it was lonely. I'd felt that my whole life. And I just started to sob from the deepest part of me. And she said, "Gotcha." She goes, "Now, what I want you to do is you're going to work this program and you're going to work it my way." And I did. And it was all about what this convention is about. Faith without works is dead. It was about getting to work. And she got me to work, and she got me to do everything, and she had no pity whatsoever. And it was a lot of action. And I told you, I had a lot of anxiety when I was new. It was bad, really bad. I just was terrified all the time. In fact, my very first sober Christmas, I called Jerry up, and I said, "Jerry," she goes, "What is it, honey?" I said, "I've got a problem." She goes, "What's that?" I said, "I'm going to die." And she said, "Well, honey, we're all going to die." I said, No, like any minute." She said, "Honey, I want you to stay in the now." And I said, "I can't, you don't understand." And I was just terrified, as only the new can be terrified. I said, "No, you don't understand." She goes, "All right, this is what I want you to do. You go get a Christmas tree and call me back." I ran to a little lot, got a little teeny 4-foot Christmas tree. I came back. She goes, "Now I want you to decorate it one ornament at a time and stay on the phone with me." And I'd put one little ornament at a time. She goes, "Now, do you have any Carpenter's Christmas Carol music?" And I said, "I do." And she goes, "Karen Carpenter is fantastic. Go put on Karen Carpenter singing," and it's so true. "Go put Karen Carpenter singing Christmas carols, put it on right now." So I did. And then we sort of decorated the tree, and by the time it was over, she goes, "Are you still alive?" I said, "Yes." And that's really how I got through my first few years of sobriety. And I'm not kidding. That's how I got through my first few years of sobriety. And I had to learn every social grace that I had never learned as a child. I would say to her, I had a sobriety sister by the name of Esther. And I'd say, "Jerry, why do people say hi to Esther when we walk into meetings and they don't say hi to me?" And she goes, "Well, honey, that's because Esther says hi to them." And I thought, make a note. This is good. But I had to learn to live. You can't live with the Howard family and Jack in the Box and not know how to live life. So what I began to learn here is how to live life. And of course, what happens to us is that little teeny tiny little postage stamp life begins to grow. And it gets big and bigger and bigger. And you better have a program, because I don't know about you, but I am as comfortable and as at peace only because of the program I'm working right this minute. Not yesterday's, not last year's, right now. Because I did not, like I said, cross the invisible line and turned into a pillar of courage. My nature is to be scared. I'm kind of a scared person. The world seems too big for me a lot of the time. But you have given me the tools that help me, like I said earlier, act like I can handle it. And then if you do, suddenly you are. Suddenly you're handling it. And life got big, and I got into a relationship, and it was good, and we were sort of the AA couple, and this person had a lot more sobriety than I did, and it was good. And we had this big house, and I thought, wow, look what happens when you work the steps. You know, I'm just kidding. And but I'll tell you, we were good AAs too. We went to a lot of meetings. But when I had about 16 years of sobriety, that relationship ended. And how it ended, it was one of those things, and I can't go into detail because I can't give away their inventory, but it had to do with honesty. Jerry used to tell me, I don't want you just to love Alcoholics Anonymous. I want you to fall in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want you to get goosed with the spirit of this program. And I did. Somewhere along the line I did. And when I had about 16 years, like I said, I just, this relationship ended and I was in bad shape. It wasn't that I wanted to drink, it was that I was in such pain I thought I would have to. And I called my friend Riley one night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I said, Riley, intellectually I understand that when God closes one door, he opens another, but what do you do when you're in the hallway? And he said, you sweep the hallway, and he hung up. And I didn't know what he meant. I thought he meant it literally. So I started, action's good, so I started sweeping my little hallway. Thank you. And but he meant it figuratively, and that is that it's not necessarily one door shutting and another one opening. There is time that you spend in the hallway. And in my experience, not only do I not see the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm not even sure I see the whole tunnel. And I'm scared in there, and I don't know, and that's when I have to rely on the fellowship to help get me through. And a very interesting thing happened at this time. My mother, who I had never been close to, suddenly came out of the woodwork. She flew down from Sacramento to visit me in Los Angeles, and I couldn't believe it. We had never, ever been close. And there she was. She knew I was getting a divorce, and so she came down, and she was going to spend a few days with me. And I don't want to tell you that everything was wonderful, because it wasn't. I mean, it was great that she was there, but we were just not cut from the same cloth, and so it was awkward. It was awkward for her. It was awkward for me. I mean, I loved that she was there, but we just didn't know what to talk about. And it was about 3 days, and she was going to then go down on the train to San Diego to visit my younger brother. And the night before she was leaving, like I said, it was as uncomfortable for her as it was for me. I had prayed, and I prayed the wrong prayer, as it happens. It worked, but I prayed the wrong prayer. I prayed for my mother to finally accept me. Wrong prayer. But what happened is the next day, we're driving, we're going to go to the Union Station to get her train ticket. And we're in the car, and we're driving downtown. We get down to Union Station, and my mother goes, what do we do now? And I said, well, we're going to get our little wallets out. We're going to go up to the counter. We're going to buy you a ticket. We're going to see what time the train leaves, and then we're going to go to the platform, and we're going to go. She says, will you show me how to do this? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to show you. And I was beginning to notice how scared she was. I had never noticed that before, interestingly. And I thought, well, she was a woman from a very different generation. Her husband did absolutely everything for her. And she was like a little girl. She was so scared. So like at every point, we'd get the ticket. She goes, now what do we do? I said, okay, well, now we're going to go over to the gate because you're leaving from gate 12B or whatever. Okay, we're going to do that, right? Yeah. Okay, and you'll tell me what happens next. I said, yes. So we get to gate 12B, and she goes, well, now what? And I said, well, we're going to take your bags, and more than likely a very nice porter will come up here to take your bags to put them on the train. And then she goes, okay, and then what do I do? I said, well, he will probably extend a hand in hopes of getting some kind of gratuity. And she goes, well, how much? And I said, $3, $2 a bag, whatever it is. Will you tell me when? Tell me when that happens? I said, sure, And I'm thinking, wow, I just never noticed that about her. What a scared woman she was, And I knew I was, but I didn't know she was. Anyway, so we get to the gate, and sure enough, as predicted, there's the porter. She has her bags. He goes to take them. He puts his hand out, and she goes, now? I said, now. And she gives him the money. And as I told you, I had the wrong prayer the night before, but it worked because at that moment, it didn't matter if my mother accepted me. Right then and there, I accepted her. Because what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous too, and what's happened for me, is it changes my perception. It didn't matter that she accepted me. All of a sudden I looked at her and thought, how cute are you? How cute are you that you do? And I threw my arms around her and I hugged her like I hadn't hugged her since I was probably 5 years old. And it was wonderful. And now I'm not going to tell you that we're girlfriends. The story doesn't end in a Pollyanna-ish way. But we have a loving respect from one another. They don't kind of get the whole AA thing, which I think is interesting. I told my mom, I said, you know, Mom, she goes, what are you doing this weekend? And I told her. And she goes, how many years? And I said, 33. And she goes, oh, that's sweet, honey. and you know, as we all do, there are a lot of times that aren't so sweet, where we're just hanging in, we're just hanging in and trying to survive. And they just never get it. And I thought, well, whatever. They never saw me drink. I always drank in private or in parking lots. And so they really never saw me drink. But they don't understand. They just don't understand what we get here. And it's pretty amazing. There's another thing that recently happened at work, the economy and blah, blah. Well, California's been hit pretty hard, as you probably heard. And last November, another thing that happened for me is I got sort of my fantasy job about 30 years ago. And I've been with this company for 30 years. And that's a good thing and a bad thing, because as you reach a certain age in corporate America, you got a little red target on your back sometimes, And I knew at our company they were going to do this massive layoff. And the only reason I knew it was massive is they were calling it a bloodbath. I thought, that's not good. And it was on November the 6th. And on November the 6th, I thought, I'm safe. I've always gotten good reviews. I've always worked my program, which I learned. One of my favorite steps is step 10, which tells me self-restraint of tongue and pen. I learned that a long time ago. I don't say what's on my mind. I wait until I'm sounding better. And so I've always been a team player because of AA. So I thought, I'm probably going to be safe. But my boss called me in. He sat me down. He goes, well, the good news is you're not being laid off today, but we're going to disband your department and your position in February of 2009. And I was sort of in shock. Now, what was going on with me right then is I was scared. I was hurt. How could he do this? I couldn't believe it. But again, I've been trained here. I honestly feel that the only decent attributes that I have at all are those that we get in Alcoholics Anonymous and from you. I don't think it. I know it. So I started to tear up a little bit. And all I did is I looked at him. I said, his name is Sean. I said, Sean, do I look normal? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I have to walk down 6 flights of stairs, and I just don't want to kind of go cry. And he said, no. He said, you're doing this very dignified and whatever. But I did. But that night I went home, and I told my spouse that what had happened. And she went into a huge depression. I was okay. She had to go lay down. But I did what I always did. I loved reading the 12 and 12. I love the big book too, but the 12 and 12, I love that Bill had about 10 years and went into more detail. And I loved taking a hot bubble bath, and I turned to step 7 about the humility. And I thought, really get this, Kay. I thought, you had nothing to do with getting this job at all. It landed in your lap. What makes you think you get to decide when it's over? And I started to feel better, and I was really okay. I mean, sure, I had my moments of, oh my God, I'm going to be a bag woman. That crept in every once in a while. But I went in the next day, and I got a call the next day from the head of Human Resources. And he called me and said, Kay, can you come up to the 15th floor? I want to talk to you. I thought, okay. And I went upstairs, and he said, shut the door, and I did. And he said, by the way, he said, your life just got a little easier by coming up here. I didn't know what he meant. And he said, we saw that your boss had you on the list. He said, but the CEO of the company and me have decided it's a mistake, and we're going to reverse the decision. Now, I'm not telling you that I believe that because I prayed and worked step 7 that night, that God said, atta girl, we're turning this around. Although I do believe that God gets me parking spots, I really do. But I do not believe that that's really what happened. What I believe what happened is, again, I was walking the walk of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did it with dignity because I am not dignified and I am not a pillar of courage. I'm scared and I was mad at this guy, but I acted graciously. And he turned it around and I was able to stay. And now, of course, then what I had to do is do a lot of resentment inventories about, the other guy. So I've been writing a lot of steps. I want to end with this one little story. When I was new, as I said, it is an honor to speak at a meeting, but it's also, I think, very nerve-wracking to speak at a meeting. It's unnatural. But anyway, so, it's nerve-wracking, intense. But when I was new and I'd be in rooms like this, I would usually be bored and be kind of half listening to the speaker and half not. That's why my friend June says, never worry, only half the people in the room are listening to it. The other half aren't anyway, so never worry about that. But I was one of those that didn't listen a lot. But I used to have this little fantasy when I was new, and it used to get me through. And I used to think, wow, when I have long-term sobriety, I'm going to be this big businesswoman and have a private jet, and I'm going to be the main speaker at a convention. And I'd have this big ego thing going on in my head. And my favorite little fantasy, it just got me through many a moment, was that I was so important, that I was this big businesswoman, and I had come back from a business trip, and oops, she's going to go speak, and I'm so important that the private jet has to land right by the convention, right there, because that's how important my time is. I would just, it's so nice to think that way. So anyway, the jet would land, and my fantasy was that I was so special that I would have to run into the meeting with luggage still in hand, with my coat not even on, just sort of over my shoulders. And I'm running up to the podium, and oh, thank God she's here. And I'm just like, oh, God, that'd be so great. And as I'm running up to the podium, the other part of my fantasies, I would hear people in the audience saying, she has all that, and she's humble too. And it occurred to me that I might need to learn a little about the true meaning of humility. Because I used to think step 7 was just one of those fillers that he got bored, he had to throw something in there. And that's what saves my life today, is trying to be in a state of humility and knowing that what we have here is what saves our lives. I mean, how fortunate are we that we're here, we're sober, you guys are celebrating your 69th anniversary, all the sobriety in this room. This thing works. Can you imagine what Bill and Bob would think to look out and see us all, and how proud they would be? I don't know about you, but there's nothing in my life that I am more proud of than being a member with you of Alcoholics Anonymous. Have a great weekend.